Did you know that October is National Breast Cancer Awareness Month? You can get more information at nbcam.org. It's also National Bullying Prevention Month, and you can get more information about that at pacer.org/bullying. Also, big happiness about the Real Refs being back. Yes, this episode, my fine zebra friends, is for you. Welcome back, everybody, to the first episode of this NFL season in 2012 with referees. This is the Fantasy Football Toolkit, and I am the Lost Cause, and coming to you, as always, every time that we broadcast, it is from across the seas, across the ocean, in the midst of Let Us Win in a very competitive league. This is the Mad Scientist. How's it going, Greg?
Tell you what, it's good to be back here in the driver's seat, especially with the toolkit. Good to be back here with my old partner. How's it been?
It's been good. It's been a lot better since we have real referees to yell at now. And, you know, we don't have Golden Tate catching touchdowns, if that's what you want to call it, anymore.
Well, what was really kind of cool, though, is in the game, when the real referees came back, they made a mistake. I loved it.
Well, they're human. You know, this game is about people making mistakes. It's human ran, even with replays, and even when we change things in the last 2 minutes of the halves, you know, it goes up to the booth automatically and blah, 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 blah. It still comes down to people, so they're going to make mistakes. But I'd rather these guys make mistakes than people that were throwing yellow flags at last year's lingerie bowl.
That's correct.
All right, let's get into the action from this past week. Week 4. It started off with Browns v1 versus Browns v2. And the Ravens ended up topping out the Cleveland Browns, sending them to 0-4 on the season, 23-16. How do you feel about Flacco this season? He puts up decent numbers. They're not like gargantuan numbers. If he doesn't have the yardage game there, he has a couple touchdowns. If he has the yardage and the touchdowns, he mixes in with a couple interceptions. Not on purpose, of course. But how do you feel about Flacco as being a top 20-ish, a top 15, possibly a top 10 kind of quarterback in fantasy football?
Well, I mean, he's not a top 10 guy. I mean, we all know that. Joe Flacco, if you have a solid team behind you, won't really hurt you. But if you're a bit marginal in your running back position or a bit marginal in your wide receivers, Joe Flacco could hurt you. Because he's just that type of marginal type of guy.
But he has so many weapons.
He does. And Torrey Smith, my God. I mean, Dennis Pitta.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you look around. 2 good receivers in Anquan Boldin and Torrey Smith. Anquan Boldin finishing the week, 9 receptions, 131, no touchdowns. You have Torrey Smith, who's pretty hot the last couple weeks. Pitta, a great pickup at tight end because nobody drafted this guy. And then, of course, you have Ray Rice in the backfield.
Yeah.
On the other side of the ball, Whedon, a rookie, put up a lot of yardage, no touchdowns, 25 of 52 attempts. You know, and I don't blame him as much as I blame Greg Little not being able to grab anything. You know, only finishing the day with 4 receptions, 77 yards. And Richardson in the backfield, I know that you have him. He's still getting the job done. Even if it's 47 yards and a touchdown, 10 points is 10 points.
You know what? Richardson's been averaging between 12 to 16 points a game over the past 4 games. And you know what? I can live with that.
In other action, the Atlanta Falcons played host to the Carolina Panthers and beat them 30-28. The Falcons now 4-0. Is it time that people give Matty Ice a little bit more credit than what they've been giving him? I mean, finishing the game, last week he finished 30 of 40. This week, 25 of 40. This week, 369 yards, 3 touchdowns. Those are pretty solid numbers.
The thing about Matty Ice is he's a smart player. His numbers are really good, because he makes good decisions. Unlike Eli Manning, who sometimes you wonder, it's like, huh? Why did he do what he did?
Hmm.
Well, 4th and 1 and you're throwing long? Why? Now, Matty Ice, this is the year that it's finally coming together. His receivers have a year of maturity behind them. They spent a year in the NFL. Gonzalez is the ageless wonder. He's Tony Gonzalez is hanging it right in there. You've got some fantastic receivers out there. Namely Roddy White, just incredible. Um, yeah, and then it always helps to have Michael Rogers and not Michael Rogers, Michael Turner and Jaquiz Rogers. Yeah, combine the two, Michael Rogers. There you go.
Well, yeah, it does. Now, do you think, speaking of the receivers, Roddy White finishes the game, 8 receptions, 169, 2 touchdowns. Do you think Julio Jones finally snaps to and starts putting up these big productive games? Because 1 or 2 receptions in a game really isn't going to get the job done. Although a lot of fantasy owners are seeing this production offensively. What should they do if they have Julio Jones? Do you think that it's time to consider trade, or do you hold on to him and he will get the production up? What would you do if you have him?
It all depends on where you are in your league. If you're starting out as 4-0 or even 2-2, you hold on to the guy. But if you're 0-4, you may want to think about trade.
Mhm. On the other side of the ball, Cam Newton, 15 of 24, 215, 2 passing touchdowns, and of course he's the leading rusher again, 9 carries, 86 yards, and 1 touchdown. Also receiving, Greg Olsen, who really didn't have productive weeks happening, turns it up for this week. 6 receptions, 89 yards, and 1 touchdown. That's pretty close to 15 points in standard scoring. Greg Olsen, finally legitimate, or is this a fluke?
I would like to say he's legitimate, but once again, the way the whole Carolina Panthers season has been, give me another game before I can legitimatize or illegitimize this type of situation here. Only because of the fact that the Panthers, up to now, have woefully underperformed. I mean, to the point where they're drawing cartoon characters of the Superman Cam Newton with Hello Kitty on his chest.
Mm-hmm. Okay, New England, we know that they can be offensive. I mean, just the past 10 years, they've shown that they could just slap the key in the ignition and go 0 to 60 in about, 2.5 seconds.
Mm-hmm.
Against Buffalo, they sure as hell turned it up. 52 to 28, finishing 2-2 on the week, or 2-2 on the year. Buffalo, of course, finishes 2-2. Tom Brady, 340 yards passing, 3 touchdowns, no interception, also rushes for 1 touchdown. The big story with this game wasn't so much the passing and the receivers, it's the incredible running backs that they have here that are building. Stephen Ridley, throughout the season, slowly building up, finishes this game 22 carries, 106, and 2 touchdowns, 4.8 average. Right next to him, while playing with him, Brandon Bolden is a solid sleeper waiver wire pick if he's available, which he probably isn't, because if you're playing a league where either one of these guys are available, there's something wrong. Bolden, 16 carries, 137, and 1 touchdown. That's an 8-yard average. I can't say that one got put in more than another, one got put in at better times than another, because even when they had the big gains, they played, back-to-back plays. For instance, Ridley's longest carry was 13 yards. Bolden, the play before, the play after, had a 12-yard carry. It's not that they're putting him situationally in. These guys are just that good. I say that even though it's a two-headed giant, and even though that they were playing against Buffalo and they might not put together 100-yard games, together in a game, I think they're both still solid starters. They're worthy of a running back 2 slot or, a flex.
I agree. I really do. One of the problems, though, that you have with this type of situation, though, is it's going to be hard for us to gauge how many carries Bolden is really going to be. I think the dominant back right now is still Stephen Ridley, or still however you say his name, Ridley.
Ridley.
There you go. I need another game to see if Bolden is going to be a flash in the pan. It's sort of like the situation that they have out in San Diego right now, where they're trying to give Matthews a little bit of a scare by giving Oh God, who's that back that's out there that they gave a shot
Battle.
to?
There's actually a few of them. Battle, I think, is the top.
Battles, yeah,
Yeah,
Jackie Battles,
Jackie Battle.
yeah, and then Norv Turner was saying that he does not regret doing this and that he'll continue going to Battles. So Battles kind of falls under the same rule of thumb that we have with Brandon Bolton here. You know, it's like, what do we do with these guys? And really, if you want to add another name to the mix here too, as to quandaries, what do you do about Mendenhall? Mendenhall's coming back now. You know, is it going to become a running back by committee in Pittsburgh with Redmond and Dwyer and company, or what's going to happen now? And these are the things that I think we need another game to kind of figure out where everything is going before we sort of pull the trigger and jump on these guys. I know in the two leagues that I'm in, Bolden was snapped up as soon as the waivers went off at 4 a.m. He was gone.
Now,
So
you mentioned a running back controversy potentially building. I guess you got to stay. You got to stay with what works. Definitely. I mean, we've always been the proponent of if you get constant points, you stick with it. You don't screw around with it too much unless you have the room to mess around with it. Now, the Buffalo rushing game is the same way. Spiller comes back from an injury. Fred Jackson comes back from an injury. You still have choice there. And if you did the right thing, which was, of course, listen to 360 Sports Network at 360sportsnetwork.com, as well as the Daily Pigskin Blink, you would have known to not have put in C.J. Spiller or Fred Jackson. They had some pretty bad performances, collectively 21 carries for 62 yards. Does either one of these running backs emerge now that Fitzpatrick is throwing a lot more? You have Chandler catching a lot, having a great game, 4 receptions, 62 yards for 2 touchdowns, and he progressively puts them back to back. What way are you leaning as far as the Buffalo running game goes? Do you stay with C.J. Spiller, who has had great games, but is slowly getting injured a little bit more, or do you go with Fred Jackson, or do you just say, to heck with both of them, I can't touch them?
at this point in time, with the motto of fantasy football is "What have you done for me lately?" I say you just stay away from them and start looking for other prospects because at this particular time frame, yeah, you're 100% right. Fitzpatrick is throwing the ball a lot better. He's not giving up the INTs as much. You got a guy out there in Chandler. You also have Stevie Johnson out there. Yeah, this has become a passing league now. Let's wait and see. Let's see who's going to emerge as that dominant back. I still think if you are a CJ Spiller owner, hold on to him because Spiller is going to end up eclipsing, Jackson there, no doubt about it. But once again, it's too tough of a call right now. And if I was a CJ Spiller owner, I would probably consider benching Spiller and finding another option to play out there because you're just not going to have the points, I don't think, for another week or two.
The Vikings playing Cinderella kind of football, 3-1. They're kings of the hill right now,
You
beating
gotta
out.
love it.
What's that?
You gotta love it. I love the Vikings.
They beat the Lions 20-13. The Lions, of course, supposed to be offensive. They have all the weapons there. It just isn't happening. Vikings down them 20-13. Ponder's asleep. Ponder had a crap game. I mean, if I could say that anybody was a dud this last week, it was going to be Ponder. 16-26, 111, no touchdowns, no INTs, finishes with just under a 65 quarterback rating. But in other games, he does pretty good. He's been averaging 2 touchdowns the previous 2 games. Rushing wise, Adrian Peterson, 21 carries, 102, getting it done. Jerome Simpson is definitely a pickup when you have these wide receivers there, especially, Piercy Harvin and the like. Simpson, if he's available, I think that you should pick him up because that offense, they just had kind of an off game. But I think that they're going to snap back. Now, you said that you love it. Do you love it more because of who else is in the division, or do you love it more just because you're like me and you just love that underdog kind of a thing?
Oh, I love the underdog type of thing more than anything else. I mean, that's just when you have a team that's been subpar for so long. And then all of a sudden they're putting the pieces together, and all of a sudden you start seeing it click. And then you start looking into the eyes of these players, and they're starting to believe in themselves, and they're starting to believe in their coach. That to me is what it's all about. It's like what happened to Cincinnati last year, the first 4 or 5 games of the season last year. That was fun to watch. It really was. And this has become a really fun game to watch right now with the Vikings. You know, Simpson and Ponder have actually clicked, and it looks like that Simpson is going to be, the number one guy out there after his 4 game suspension. The whole 10 yards. We won't get into the Goodell issue, but nonetheless, this has become kind of fun to watch.
Now, on the other side of the ball, it wasn't that much fun. The Detroit Lions, Matt Stafford, 30 of 51 for only 319, a 6-yard average, no touchdowns, no INTs, finishes the game with a 58 quarterback rating. Looking at some of his targets, Megatron, 5 receptions out of 12 targets. Burleson, 5 receptions out of 8 targets. The guys weren't really making the catches, but I think that it was also a little bit of the targeting issues that Stafford was having. On the ground, the game didn't get any better either. LaShore, the top rusher, with only 13 carries for 26 yards. I think that they're going to snap back. I think that they just happened, and it's not a fluke. You're playing against the best team in your division, and you lost in this manner. I think that they could snap back against other teams, but Minnesota just knew how to get it done and how to shut down that offensive squad that is the Lions this year.
I think the Lions have actually lost their identity. I don't think they really know who they are or what they're all about, to be honest with you. This was a team that, of course, was rebuilding constantly since 1957, that all of a sudden got it together last year, and were actually the sweethearts of the summer going into this year's NFL season. And, I mean, LaShore, where did this guy come from? Everybody thought Kevin Smith was the main man up there. You're seeing a lot of no-name running backs. You're seeing a lot of strange occurrences happening up there. I'm thinking that maybe Mr. Schwartz has decided to get a little too creative with this team. I'm not sure. But I think this is a team that's kind of lost its identity and lost basically its way of doing things and needs to find itself again.
Who knows? As far as fantasy football goes, it's consistency. And if they're not consistent, I have a tough time playing them, except for LaShore. LaShore just is like, he's a young running back who they said is going to be a starter, and he should be doing a lot better at that offense. That offense should be doing a lot better for him, and it just didn't happen this week. It will. They'll bounce back. No problems. No worries. Speaking of bouncing back and, really manhandling things, let's look at the Chargers-Chiefs game. The Chargers beat out the Chiefs at Kansas City 37-20. The Chargers now 2-0 in away games, 3-1 on the season. Phillip Rivers 18-23, 209, 2 touchdowns, 1 INT. And the rushing game, Matthews, I think the front office is kind of getting past Matthews, as we said a little bit ago. 14 carries for 61 yards, and looking towards Battle, who had a battle for these yards, 15 carries, 39 yards, and 1 touchdown. And he gets the job done 2 ways, and that's why you got to love Battle a lot more than Matthews at this point. Caught 4 receptions for 42 yards and a touchdown. The other side of the ball, Kansas City, Matt Castle. Decent fantasy numbers if you play 2 or 3 quarterbacks to start. 24 42, 251, 2 touchdowns, 3 interceptions. Jamal Charles, underrated. I thought this guy was just going to be not even crap, but like Dingleberry, like the leftovers, right? 17 carries, 92 yards, 1 touchdown. Also gets it done in the air. 3 receptions, 23 yards, and 1 touchdown receiving. Bo also with 7 receptions, 108, 1 touchdown, but getting targeted 12 times and only receiving the ball 7 times. Some of these guys, I understand that they're the aerial threat, but those hands have got to be more like they got 2 pounds of stickum on them with the amount of targets that they see. They have to catch the ball a lot more than that. Because if he can put up 108 yards on 7 receptions, imagine what he would have done if he would have had the other 5 in his hands.
Oh, I agree. I
Now,
agree.
one other guy that I think that we should hit up while we're talking about Kansas City, and you got to watch the Peyton Hillis situation, whether he's coming back or not, and how Jamal Charles is handling everything, is Sean Drown. I like him. He's young. He's a deep sleeper. He's not going to pay off, immediately. But if you play in deeper leagues, 12 to 16, if you have keeper situations, if you play a couple flex positions, and you're running thin at running back, and
Mm.
especially if you play in a PPR, Drown, 4 receptions, 34 yards. He only got 4 touches on the ground for 12 carries, but Jamal Charles only had 17. As a team, they only had 22 rushing attempts this past Sunday. Look for Drown. He's going to be a deeper sleeper later on, kind of a thing. You're running thin, pick him up. But I could almost put my stamp guarantee that this guy's going to be pulling in about 8 to 10 points per week as you get into week 11, week 12, and then past.
Yeah, that's a safe analysis there, no doubt about it. Especially as the game wears on, we cannot expect Jamal Charles to keep this pace. Jamal Charles was even surprised at what he put up. And he was the first to admit that he was a bit surprised at how well he played. So yeah, Drowns definitely is somebody that you want to pick up if that's a deep one. How deep is it? Pretty deep, but it's
Yeah.
still a good one.
Well, we're not going to say too much except that it's balls deep. Anyway, the
There
St.
you
Louis
go.
Rammies, St. Louis Rammies pull it off 19 to 13 against Seattle, and they're beating their own records. They're now 2-2.
Jeff Fisher, God bless him.
They're 2-0 at home this season, which is actually pretty surprising. Bradford 16-30, 221, no touchdowns, 1 INT. Yeah, that just brought me right back down to reality. Now, to bring me right back up, Amendola. If you drafted him just like I need another starting receiver, or if he's, running the waiver wire, and you picked him up, you're smiling from ear to ear. 6 receptions, 55 yards, and 1 touchdown. He just keeps getting fantasy points week in and week out.
Yeah, yeah, he's one of those eighth, ninth round gems that nobody ever saw happening this way, especially after the woeful season he put up last season, which goes both ways. Sam Bradford put up a woeful season. Sam Bradford was injured most of the season. They had no consistency, and it seems that they maybe sat down and studied the playbook together or something because they're in sync, no doubt about it. And he's getting the targets and he's paying off. It's a great find for him this year.
Now, what isn't a great find is if you ended up picking up Russell Wilson
Mm.
after last week's kind of clutch win against Green Bay. He didn't really do that great this week. While last week he had 2 touchdowns and no INTs, this week he didn't find the end zone and he had 3 interceptions. On the ground, though, Marshawn Lynch, 20 carries, 118, 1 touchdown. He's gold. He's an undervalued running back that should be considered a top 10 running back. He's gold week in and week out. And there are no other running backs there that are even remotely going to come close to knocking at the door. Yes, Turbin has 6 carries for 45 yards this week. He had some last week. Marshawn Lynch is solid, and like I said, he's undervalued.
Marshawn Lynch, the whole trade that happened to get Marshawn Lynch up in Seattle was a brilliant move by Pete Carroll's part. Marshawn, this is definitely the right type of team, the right type of environment for this guy to basically get the job done and all of a sudden put up some big numbers because everybody forgets about Seattle. Remember Sean Alexander when he played for Seattle?
Yep.
Everybody was like, "Who's this guy? Where did he come from?" He's been out there for a number of years, and for some reason or another, Seattle just communication from out west doesn't trickle out here to the east that well. Perhaps I'm not sure, but nonetheless, Lynch is in a great situation, putting up some terrific numbers, and if you have them, keep them.
Speaking of the whole East-West kind of thing, the 49ers really manhandled the New York Jets this past week. I mean, 34-0. They created a lot of controversy in this game too. Number one, Santonio Holmes done for the season. Number
Mhm.
two, you have a massive quarterback controversy right now because Sanchez just isn't getting it done. He finishes the game 13-29, 103, no touchdowns, one INT, which leads to a quarterback rating of 2.8, the lowest that I have ever seen in my life. On the ground, Sean Green, he's losing faith. You know, the front office, the coaching staff, they don't want him in there as much anymore. And I think that you're going to see a bunch of changes happening come next week. I think Balil Powell is going to see more touches. Sean Green he better get his butt in gear. You might even see Tim Tebow starting next week coming
No,
up.
no,
You might. The way
no,
that they were
no,
running that offense, the Wildcat offense and trick plays, you might see him in there.
no. What has happened here is the New York Jets don't have the personnel to pull off anything. This is a team that went out and built themselves around supposed star players. They have the best team money could buy, except that money gets injured. And they have no legitimate backups. Tim Tebow will not start. Tim Tebow was a circus act. Tim Tebow will continue to be a circus act as long as Mr. Ryan is the coach.
No, because God wants him to start. Don't you know?
Well, I am the mad scientist.
On the other side of the ball, Alex Smith throws for no touchdowns, but that's okay because in this game, you have the threat of Revis, who is done this season, but you still have the threat of the corners, the defense for the Jets. Aerially, they do stop a lot of the passing stuff. So I thought it would be on the ground, and sure enough, it was. Frank Gore, Hunter, and Kaepernick. And in case you're keeping score at home, folks, that's the backup quarterback who had 5 carries for 50 yards, one of them being a touchdown. They all scored touchdowns. Frank Gore, 21 carries, 62 yards, 1 touchdown. Ken Hunter, 8 carries, 56 yards, and 1 touchdown. In the air, like I said, not so much happening. Manningham, 47 yards, Walker, 31, Vernon Davis, 28, and Crabtree with a very, very tiny 2 receptions for 15 yards.
I think in this particular game that we've just commented upon, it's not so much the offense as the collapse of the Jets' defense that was the root cause of the 34-0 shellac. In that game, in the latter part of the third quarter and the fourth quarter, Hot Butter would put up a better defense than the Jets.
Hot Butter's nice. Anyway, the Texans play host to the Tennessee Titans. The Texans finish the game 38-14 over Tennessee and finishes Week 4 4-0 for the first time in Texans history. Matt Hasselbeck for the Tennessee Titans, 17-25, 193, 2 touchdowns. Chris Johnson, I don't care what anybody says, Chris Johnson is still worthy of getting drafted in the top 5. 25 carries, 141. I just wish he'd do it every week, maybe throwing a touchdown or 2. And Wright is the leading receiver for the Titans, 4 receptions, 46 yards, and 1 touchdown. But let's talk about Schwab. 20 of 28. He couldn't hear us right then because, of course, he's missing his ear. 202. 2 touchdowns. Foster on the ground, 24 carries, 86, and 1 touchdown. And the big man, the sleeper at the beginning of the year, who somebody I know has on their team, and it's paying off dividends week in and week out. 6 receptions, 72 yards, and 1 touchdown. 13 points in standard scoring. How do you feel about the man, Owen Daniels?
You know what? Owen Daniels, I think, is really coming in on his own right now. And I am going to go as far as to say that with his emergence right now and the confidence that Matt Schaub has, even with a portion of his ear gone, this is a team that's going to make it into the Super Bowl. I really, really see the Texans, putting forth. This is going to be the new New Orleans Saints. To be honest with you, I mean, we can see beaucoup points coming up from every direction possible out there. I mean, it used to be just the Andre Johnson, Matt Schaubauer, but now you've got Owen Daniels that's picking up that pace. You have Arian Foster that's doing the job right now. Everybody is pitching in. Everybody is a scoring option. This Texans team is loaded.
Another team that's loaded just isn't getting it done is the Oakland Raiders. They fall to Denver at home 37-6. Carson Palmer's my firing squad guy. 19 of 34, 202, no touchdowns, no INTs. What's going on? Denarius Moore, 4 receptions, 71 yards out of 8 targets. You also had Marcel Reese, 5 receptions for 54, and you had Kreiner, 2 receptions for 29. And the big man, the sleeper from earlier, has an off game. Brandon Myers, only 1 reception for 22 yards. McFadden couldn't get it down on the ground. Neither could Goodson. 13 carries for 34 for McFadden. For Goodson, 3 carries for 22 yards. On the other side of the ball, Peyton Manning, 30 of 38 for 338. Peyton Manning of old, 3 touchdowns, no interceptions. Willis McGahee on the ground, and I called it. 19 receptions, 112 for 1 touchdown in the air. Demaryius Thomas, 5 receptions, 103. Eric Decker, 7 receptions, 79 yards, and 1 touchdown. And the big letdown of the fantasy football year gets a couple catches in Jacob Tamme. 5 receptions out of 6 targets for 38 yards and no touchdowns. Dreesen and Lance Ball having the other 2 receiving touchdowns. How do you feel about Peyton Manning being in this new environment? Is he going to keep recover? I mean, this almost feels like a recovery year until he has games like this where it's not a recovery, like he's playing almost championship type of football.
I keep thinking of that Amy Winehouse song "Rehab." No, but seriously, I mean, yeah, I like Peyton Manning in the orange and blue, no doubt about it. Yeah, I'm a sucker for Peyton Manning. I will watch him play ball. I'll watch him when he's not his best. This is a new chapter right now. Granted, we have all witnessed the fact that his arm is not as strong as it used to be. His brain is as sharp as it was, though, and it will continue to be sharp. And Peyton Manning will win games with his wit rather than with his arm.
Yeah, and for any other quarterback, when you look at these numbers, the first game of the season, 31-19 win against Pittsburgh, he only went 19 for 26, but he still had 253, 2 touchdowns, no interceptions. Now, for any other quarterback in the league, you can make a case to get him started on your roster, for your team. Against Houston last week, 26 of 52, and only 50% passing, but still having the yardage, 330 and 2 touchdowns, no interceptions. Yeah, he had the bad game against the Falcons, but the Falcons are the hottest team in football right now, in which he only threw for 241, 1 touchdown, and 3 interceptions. But really, against Houston, against Oakland, against Pittsburgh, he's putting up points, and he's a solid play. He's a solid start, and anybody that drafted him, no matter when they drafted him, could definitely be patting themselves on the back at making a smart fantasy football play. The Miami Dolphins come into Arizona. They're hoping for a win. They're begging for a win. They even threw to a receiver for 253 yards in a ridiculous effort to make him a fantasy sleeper and have him go from only owned in 6% of the leagues in public leagues up to 84%. But they still lose to the Arizona Cardinals 21-24 as the Cardinals finish week 4 4-0. Tannehill, 26 of 41 for 431. That's a lot of yardage. 1 touchdown, 2 interceptions. Reggie Bush on the ground, 17 carries for 67 yards. In the air, of course, as we mentioned, if he's available, pick him up because apparently Tannehill, a rookie, is building a relationship with Brian Hartline. Pick him up. 12 receptions out of 19 targets. Holy cow. For 251 and 1 touchdown. The second receiver, Devon Bess, might be worth it too, but I don't think so just yet. 7 receptions for 123. How do you feel about Hartline and Tannehill, that connection. Do you think that that's going to develop into something more solid to where you can warrant starting Tannehill potentially on bye weeks?
Not at this time. No. Yeah, this guy's getting targeted. Yeah, the ball's going his way, but remember, this is only week 4 of a 16-week season. I think the better quarterback receiver tandem that you want to take a look at is going to be Christian Ponder and Jerome Simpson.
Yeah. On the other side of the ball, Kevin Kolb, 29 of 48, 324, 3 touchdowns, 2 interceptions on the ground. Arizona's just could not get it done. Ryan Williams, 13 carries for only 26 yards. But that doesn't take away his fantasy value. In other weeks, he's going to be more productive. I look forward, especially with this aerial assault going. You're not going to have 7 guys in the box all the time. You're going to have a lot of the inside linebackers fall back into a short zone, and that's going to lead to a lot more yards than what he was seeing this past weekend. In the air, though, pick him up if he's available. Andre Roberts, I think that he's going to end up becoming what Anquan Boldin was to Larry Fitzgerald a couple years ago. 6 receptions, 118 for 2 touchdowns. And, of course, Fitz gets it done yet again. 8 receptions out of 15 targets, though, for 64 yards and a touchdown. The Bengals come into Jacksonville hoping for a win, begging for a win, and they really don't need to do too much to get it. 27-10. Dalton, 20 of 31, 244, 2 touchdowns. The Law Firm, 26 carries for a respectable 82 yards. And A.J. Green just keeps on rolling. Top 10 fantasy football wide receiver this year. 6 receptions, 117, and 1 touchdown. Gabbert tries, and just cannot put together a lot of drives. 23 of 34, 186, only 1 touchdown. And MJD, a big fantasy football fan, lets his fantasy football owners down a bunch. 13 carries for only 38 yards. The Saints, this is a team that you love, lose again. 0-4 on the season at the end of this week to the Packers, 28-27. The Packers now 2-2. And I don't care what anybody says, Drew Brees is still fantasy gold no matter what. The guy passes for 400 yards. He will have a 500-yard game before the end of the season. Gets 3 touchdowns in the air. Sproles, only 5 carries for 20 yards. And Colston, the leading receiver, 9 receptions for 153 and 1 touchdown. What are they doing wrong? So me as a fantasy football owner, I can kind of try to figure out, some of these matchups a little bit better. I would figure the Packers, they would have a tougher time with, and yet offensively, they're actually pretty well at scoring in the air.
I think the problem is not so much the offense as it is their defense right now. And the schedule. It just doesn't add up. This is a team that's in the hunt most of the time, but once again they're 0-4. It's a little scary, but I really think that. Well, I don't know what to think, to be honest with you. I mean, you got Darren Sproles, basically catching a ton of passes. He's breaking in a nice number of points. Jimmy Graham's been, catching the ball quite well. Marquise Colston's been contributing. Everybody's contributing. Everybody's on deck. I mean, it's a fantasy gold team, but they're not winning.
On the other side of the ball, 2-2, but offensively, still productive. Aaron Rodgers still getting things done. 31 of 41, 319, 4 touchdowns, 1 INT, but that's okay. On the ground, Cedric Benson, 18 carries, 84 yards. He's a big story this year, especially if you took him late or you ended up scooping him up off of waiver wires in, not so deep leagues, we'll say. In the air, Jordy Nelson, 8 of 93 for 1 touchdown. Cobb, a receiving running back, 7 receptions, 66 yards. James Jones. James Jones is only owned in 75% of public leagues, so if he's available, you might want to pick him up because he's developing as a pretty solid play for the Green Bay Packers. 5 receptions, 56 yards, 2 touchdowns. Jermichael Finley, 4 receptions for 54 yards. Green Bay, their record should be a little bit different, in my opinion, because of what's happened in previous weeks with animals that are striped, we'll say. Without bringing in any lingerie bowls discussions at all, but their record should be a little bit better. Offensively, they're doing what they need to do. And like I said, Cedric Benson, that's a pretty big story for them because he's putting up a pretty good amount of numbers every week. It's not in the upper echelon. It's not 120 yards and a touchdown every week. But if it's me and if he's my number 3 running back, or if I play a little bit deeper and he's my flex play, or he's even my RB2 for sure, you know, 8 to 10 points a week is solid enough for me to feel comfortable with making other decisions.
I agree. Cedric Benson, I think, has been a terrific find for the Packers. Once again, I think this is a team that is not going to be going running back by committee. Benson is the main man out there, and he will give you, as you just mentioned, a solid 8 to 10, maybe even more. 13, 14 points a week.
Speaking of solid numbers, and we'll go as far as saying solid numbers from rookies. The Redskins end up beating Tampa Bay at home, 24-22. The Redskins now 2-2 on the year, 2-1 in away games. RG3, 26-35, 323, no touchdowns, no interceptions, but that's okay because if he doesn't throw them in the air, he's going to get them on the ground. Runs 7 times for 43 yards and 1 touchdown, and of course, another story at running back, another no-name running back that nobody was aware of. Alfred Morris, 21 carries, 113, and 1 touchdown. Fred Davis is, of course, the number 1 target for RG3, 4 receptions, 70 yards, no touchdowns. Josh Morgan, 4 receptions, 62 yards. Leonard Hankerson, this is a sleeper wide receiver. He's going to keep developing more and more. I can almost guarantee it. He had 11 looks this past week, only 7 receptions for 57 yards. What do you think of RJ3? Is he just a baby Cam Newton, or is he going to develop into more of a passer and with the ability to run?
The intangible here is that this is a very, very intelligent quarterback. This is a guy that, he went to law school, for goodness sakes. He's no mental midget by any means. That is the intangible, which makes him not so much a baby Cam Newton, but I'd say probably the real deal here. This is a guy who's got a style that's similar to Michael Vick. He loves to rush. He loves to throw. He's a smaller player, which means that he's got to rely on his intellectual ability because he won't be able to take the hit that is eventually going to put him under because he is a smaller player. But on the same token, if he changes his game up just a little bit next year to keep it from becoming stale and to keep it from becoming predictable, because films will show your tendencies one way or the other, this guy can go far.
What would you put his worth at? If you would have to trade, if you would have RG3 and someone would say you could take any player that's available from my squad, who matches up as far as you feeling secure with the points, as well as having a decent upside in RG3?
Well, if I was going to trade him for, let's say, a running back, I would probably put him in probably the Trent Richardson category.
Mm-hmm.
I'd say a top 10 type running back. Not so much a Marshawn Lynch type running back, but a Trent Richardson running back, and maybe an AP right now in his present state. He's that good. The upside's there. The downside is the fact that he's a rookie. But the upside, I think, outweighs the downside.
Well, let's not forget about another downside. He's also a Washington quarterback. He's proving a lot of people wrong with that, but, I feel a little bit concerned still about the fact that he's on the Washington Redskins.
No, because he wasn't traded there.
Oh, is that what? And he wasn't a free agent either. You can't forget that one. Okay.
Yeah, there you go. Not a free agent, not traded there. Don't worry about it. He'll be there.
On the other side of the ball, Josh Freeman finishes the game 24-39, 299, one touchdown, and one INT on the ground. Well, there really wasn't too much of a ground game, unless your last name is Blunt. Only 6 carries for 17 yards, but still gets a touchdown. Doug Martin is still the starter there. Do you see Blunt potentially grabbing swipes away from Doug Martin, or this is just fluky and they just had a bad game on the ground?
I think it's just a fluky thing right now. I think Doug Martin is going to be the man. But the real story about the Tampa Bay Bucks, Mike Williams.
Yes, 4 receptions for 115. No touchdowns, but you know what? 11 points off of receptions, and he does get you a touchdown every now and then. Vincent Jackson as well, right beside him, 6 receptions for 100 yards and 1 touchdown. I really like Mike Williams in a major way. I liked him early on. Nobody really had any faith in him just because of the team that he was on. Then after week 1 against Carolina, 2 receptions, 12 yards, but he had a touchdown. So 7 points in standard scoring. Against the Giants, 59 yards with 1 touchdown. Had a bad kind of a week against Dallas, but I think that was just kind of a bad game for everybody that was playing in that loss, 10-16 against the Cowboys. But, this past week, like I said, 4 receptions for 115, and one of them being a 65-yard reception. Pretty decent numbers.
Oh, yeah. And you pair him up with VJax, you've got yourself a nice tandem there. Something that's actually going to save Freeman's butt and save his job over there in Tampa Bay.
More divisional action. Back to divisional action as the Giants lose to the Philadelphia Eagles in Philadelphia. The Giants finished the week 2-2 on the season. The Eagles 3-1. They're also 2-0 at home. Eli Manning, 24 of 42, 309, 2 touchdowns, 1 INT. Bradshaw, the leading rusher on the ground for the Giants, 13 carries for only 39 yards. But without any Hakeem Nicks, you got a couple guys that are starting to show you some signs of something. Dominic Hickson, 6 receptions for 114. Cruz, everybody knows about, but still playing like a number 1 wide receiver. 9 receptions, 109 for 1 touchdown. Ahmad Bradshaw caught 3 receptions for 38 yards. Keep your eye out for that. The kind of a sore spot that I had was in Martellus Bennett. He was doing pretty good in some of those other games. Only had 1 reception for 2 yards this past week.
Yeah.
Michael Vick on the other side of the ball, 19 of 30 for 241, 1 touchdown. Finishes the game with a 90 quarterback rating, also having 49 yards on the ground. LaShawn McCoy felt like counting as he finishes with 123 yards on the ground, as well as 17 yards in the air. Deshaun Jackson, 6 receptions for 99 yards. Yes, you missed out on a fantasy point because he didn't have 1 more yard. Deshaun Jackson owners feel bad, but feel good that he scored a touchdown. So there you go. Brent Selleck, right next to him, 4 receptions for 57 yards. Sorry about that. In Monday night action, the Bears beat out the offensive powerhouses that once were known as the Dallas Cowboys, 34-18. Satan finishes the night, 18 of 24 for 275 and 2 touchdowns. Here's my thing with Cutler. You got to love Cutler because in the games where he's supposed to outperform, he underperforms just enough to make him look good, but not to make him look great. Then when you don't think he's going to do anything, the guy comes out and has a decent game. This was a decent game. 275 and 2 touchdowns. That's, you're looking at the neighborhood of, let's see, 11, 19 to about 25 fantasy points, depending on the way that scoring works for your quarterback. How do you feel about him for the rest of the season? Is he a solid play at quarterback if you're running in a deeper league at QB1, or is he kind of just play the matchup, fill him in for a bye week kind of a quarterback?
Well, once again, if you draft Cutler, you're going to be along for the ride because it's going to be a long, bumpy, and hot ride. There's going to be games like when he had a Monday night, and then he'll go stone cold for probably 2 to 3 weeks. And he'll end up, just when you start to like him as a person, he'll start yelling at your coaches.
Yeah, how about that one?
And yelling at his receivers. The guy truly is Satan.
Well, I mean, if it works with the receivers, you figure now Brandon Marshall, out of 8 targets, only misses one, finishes the night 7 receptions for 138 and 1 touchdown. Davis, the second receiver, 3 receptions, 62 yards, no touchdowns. But Devin Hester, 3 receptions, 38 yards, and 1 touchdown. They just couldn't get it rolling on the ground. Forte, 13 carries for 52 yards. Bush, 10 carries for only 29. Collectively, they went 28 of 93, a 3.3 yard average on the ground. But in bigger news, in the biggest news of the week, a record was set for Tony Romo, a personal best, 5 interceptions in one game. How terrible is that? 31 completions off of 43 attempts, 307, 1 touchdown, and like I said, 5 interceptions. Ooh, DeMarco Murray. 11 carries for only 24 yards, but in the air, 7 receptions for 57 yards. Witten, the leading receiver for Dallas, really good hands. 13 receptions off of 14 targets for 112, 1 touchdown. Des Bryant, 8 receptions for 105. The other touchdown going to Miles Austin. I cannot get this for the life of me with these guys. It's just like Romo seems to be possibly the piece that's wrong in that offense. And then another week, it's going to be the running game. And in another week, these receivers are going to be targeted 10, 11, 12 times and only have 4 or 5 receptions. As a fantasy owner, you got to be kicking yourself owning some of these guys.
Yeah, you do. As a matter of fact, I ended up dropping a lot of these guys as a result of what's going on. I mean, it's got to the point right now as a fantasy owner, if you have Tony Romo and you're starting Tony Romo, you're probably going to lose your game, depending upon how many points are taken away from you if you throw an interception. The trouble with Tony Romo is that he is not bad enough to be a not starter or to be a non-starter.
Hmm.
Okay, he is kind of like I would say a cruder version of Eli Manning. Okay,
Okay.
if you put Tony Romo on the New York Giants, Tony Romo would be the toast of New York. They would forgive an interception or two because Eli Manning throws a few interceptions, but he would have the protection that Eli Manning has. You put Eli Manning on the Cowboys, he's worse than Tony Romo.
So you're saying it's the team and not the man.
It's the offensive line. It's truly, truly offensive. It's so offensive that DeMarco Murray can't even get going. And, once again, it comes back to Jerry Jones just basically more concerned about the pink panties that the Victoria's Secret store is selling on Monday night and the booty call than he's concerned about his offensive line. He needs to go out and truly get some football players. He's got talent, but he doesn't have a line. If you don't have a line, the game is won and lost right there on the line. I mean, if you don't have a line, forget it. Witten's not going to do anything for you. Okay, yeah, he got lucky over Monday night. Okay, fine. That's the first emergence of Witten in 4 weeks. Granted, he was coming off a spleen injury. Okay, that's fine. DeMarco Murray, woeful, woeful, woeful. And as a DeMarco Murray owner, I am on the verge of dropping this guy. Except that I picked him up in the second round. So, that's basically delegitimizing or illegitimatizing my draft. What do you do?
Get rid of them all.
Yeah.
Trade them off while you can, because who knows? I don't know. It's fantasy football playing with real players. It's tough with that team. It's always been tough.
Year after year after year. It even went back to the point where they, maybe we all need to get along with, get to know each other a little bit better. This is a team from top to bottom just needs to be on the firing squad.
All right, let's look at some. Speaking of firing squad, yeah, I think it's about time to look at who needs to have the little handkerchief wrapped around their eyes needs to get a barrel loaded because they just played so piss poor this past week. My pick is, as said before, Carson Palmer. He looked good. He looked like he was going to keep developing more and more with that offense. That aerial game was going to get larger and larger and larger at the beginning of the season, and now he's just not getting things done like I thought. He finishes week 4, 202, no touchdowns, no interceptions. Not only that, he was overthrowing his receivers left and right, and he has good receivers in Daenerys Moore at wide receiver, and, as I said, a sleeper from earlier in the season, tight end Brandon Myers. Who is your guy? You're going to put him on the target and just blow him away.
Well, once again, I mean, I've been wrestling around with a couple different players here. One of which was the entire offensive line for the Dallas Cowboys. You can't just mow them because that's a mass execution, and that wouldn't be right. Uh, with the firing squad, I would actually have to go and say it's Greg Little from the Cleveland Browns. And not that I would, who in their right mind would have Greg Little on their league? In their league, draft or otherwise. But when you take a look at the opportunities that he was given by Brandon Whedon, this is a guy that could have gotten noticed like a Jerome Simpson or a Brian Hartline because he's been getting the looks, but he cannot hold on to the ball. Greg Little, execution squad.
Execution squad. And you're right. He gets the looks. It's just I don't know. Some of these receivers are being seen perfectly crystal clear over and over again. They have their hands up, and they just can't get the job done. He only has proof a very, very low 13 receptions on the season in 3 games that he played. He, of course, didn't play week 1 against the Eagles. Yeah, I think those two guys should be holding hands with daisies between them as they both get blasted away, because damn. Why don't we take a look at some pretty solid starts for this week coming up? I think we'll take a look at quarterbacks first, and I hate saying this, but I'm going to. Cutler. Cutler. He was my friend at one time, then he wasn't, then he was, then he wasn't. I'm on the fence with him a little bit, but I can say that, if you do have him, you don't really have anybody else. They're going to be at Jacksonville. Jacksonville has a craptastic run defense. They give up the 4th most fantasy points to running backs, but at the same time, I think if you have his receivers starting to catch a little bit more, him actually being a little bit more aware, not throwing as many interceptions, they're not going to be a whole lot of points, but they're going to be solid points every week.
I can go with that. Basically, my solid start right now would be Matt Ryan.
Matty Ice.
Matty Ice. You got the hot hand, you keep riding the hot hand.
Huh. I don't know. There's a joke in there somewhere, but I'm not going to say it. They're playing. Yeah, they're playing at Washington. They're
Yeah.
a damn hot team. I mean, the Cardinals. These are 2 of the hottest teams in the NFL right now, and he's not only throwing to 2 people. He's spreading the ball around and he's making good decisions.
Right.
So yeah, I definitely agree with that. I'd even say Andrew Luck maybe. Now, of course, this is also getting past the Aaron Rodgers, Drew Brees, Tom Brady kind of discussion. Cam Newton, RG3, both of them, yes. Christian Ponder is facing off against Tennessee's defense, and they've allowed a league high 118 quarterback rating this whole year. But I'd even say, like I said, Andrew Luck. He's attempted 45 plus passes in 2 of his first 3 games. They were both losing efforts though. But if the passes keep up this week against Green Bay, he should get the fantasy points rolling again for himself.
Oh yeah, I'll give you another name too, Matt Chop, going against the porous New York Jets defense.
Yeah. Unfortunately, I think the Jets are up there as a must start versus, we'll say. The The most fantasy football points allowed to quarterbacks, the top five are Cleveland, Washington, New England, New Orleans, and Buffalo. So keep your eyes out for those. As far as defenses go, Tennessee just is craptastic. Anybody that plays against the Tennessee defense, you should start. And that brings me to another solid play who I didn't think really was going to be this good this year, but he's putting up points, and you need to keep playing him until he gets re-injured, is Adrian Peterson.
Yeah, Adrian Peterson would be a very solid play. Another solid play that I'm looking at is Richardson from Cleveland. I would keep riding Richardson at this particular time frame because he's got nowhere to go but up with the way that offense is running. Until Greg Little learns how to catch a ball, Richardson is the offense.
Yeah, but it's kind of a tough play playing at the Giants this week coming up. You a little bit worried being an owner of Richardson?
No.
No, not at all.
No.
More solid starts, of course. Alfred Morris. The guys still getting it done. They're going to be facing off against Atlanta, but I don't think that's going to deter him at all. He's registered between 78 and 113 rushing yards in all 4 games. He also has more carry. Only 2 other running backs have had more carries than Alfred Morris, and that's Arian Foster and Marshawn Lynch. I think that he's going to keep going as the season gets better. Stay away from Fred Jackson and C.J. Spiller for a lot of reasons. And if he's available, I'd still pick up the law firm because, well, he just does it no matter what team he's on. They're not monster points, 20, 30 points a week, but they're a solid, I'm entering the double-digit numbers every week.
Right, I would agree to that.
Let's see here. The most fantasy football points giving up per game to running backs. And just to keep your eyes open for this, New Orleans, of course, has just been giving up way, way, way too many yards, too many fantasy points to opposing offenses. Carolina is also giving up a lot. Tennessee, as mentioned before, Jacksonville, and the Jets for wide receivers. Most fantasy points allowed by teams: Washington, Cleveland, Tampa Bay, New Orleans, and Buffalo, which leads me to Victor Cruz. Those receivers from the Giants, they're going to keep getting points, and don't let Bennett's last performance take you down at all. I think all those receivers there, led by Victor Cruz right now in Hakeem Nicks' stead, are going to keep getting the job done.
Mm-hmm. I would say that. I would say that. Yeah, I would say that.
Other solid wide receiver starts that aren't with the last name Fitzgerald. Wallace is pretty. Wallace should be solid. Philadelphia's secondary is tough, but there's a lot of targets on the team for the Steelers, so I think that he could have a decent game. A lot of people had given up on Wes Walker. He kind of showed that he can do it, and against Denver, well, hosting Denver, he should get the job done. Speaking of, Eric Decker, still a solid option to play. Who's a couple solid receivers that are in your mind should put up some pretty decent numbers again this week?
Oh, Roddy White, I think, is going to put up some tremendous numbers. I think another guy to watch out for is going to be Steve Smith. I think he's going to have a re-emergence against the Seattle secondary. I think we're going to see if Cam Newton is for real. Steve Smith will be the beneficiary of some other things of the ball. Brandon LaFell's been getting a lot of looks. If you want to go deep, that's somebody you might want to think about. And, of course, I think Jerome Simpson's going to be the surprise. He's going to be the Cinderella surprise this week against the Tennessee Titans.
Man, those Titans, they are absolutely horrible when it comes to defenses, except if you're the opposing fantasy football owner that has the tight end. And this week, the lucky lotto for playing against the Tennessee Titans, who have allowed twice as many fantasy football points per game to the tight end position than 22 teams in the league, is Kyle Rudolph, who is a solid play this week.
It's funny how many people gave up on Kyle Rudolph because of a lackluster game last week. The guy's just been on fire. He has a lackluster game, and, well, he's back on the waiver wire again. Hello.
Um, Other solid plays. Heath Miller, he's actually owned, and I think they don't say 100% because they're trying to be well, you probably have empty public leagues, but Heath Miller, if he's available, if you are in that 1% or 0.1%, you need to pick him up because he's a scoring machine. He's a solid play. Antonio Gates, another solid play. And finally, Fred Davis, you know, solid play against Atlanta this week at tight end.
Hmm.
For defenses, you want a solid foundation, you start with the defense. San Francisco 49ers, any owners like that are going to be more than happy facing off against Fitzgerald as they host the Buffalo Bills. The Chicago Bears are playing at Jacksonville, another solid defense. Houston Texans just keep getting the job done. The Giants and the Ravens front seven are in the front of the NFL. And the surprise, the Arizona Cardinals and the Vikings, they have defenses. Not only that, they're playing against the Cardinals, against, or at, I should say, the St. Louis Rams, and the Vikings are playing host to the Tennessee Titans. Who I'd stay away from as far as defensive football goes, stay away from the Broncos. They're playing against New England, and New England could be explosive at any time. Cleveland, if you own their defense, you might want to watch out. The Giants passing game is pretty strong. The Chiefs, yeah, Baltimore, they're not just a defense anymore, led by Flacco, Ray Rice, Torrey Smith. These guys catch passes, they throw, they run. You need to keep an eye out for that. And if you still own the Tennessee Titans defense as they're squaring off week 5 at the Vikings, not only do you need to be shot, but your fantasy football privileges needs to be revoked for the rest of your life because the Titans are the worst defense fantasy football wise in the NFL so far as we enter week 5 in the NFL season.
Oh, yeah. I'll tell you, though, a sleeper defense, if you are caught in the quandary here and you've got the Green Bay Packers, and the Green Bay Packers have been very disappointing, drop the Green Bay Packers, pick up the Carolina Panthers. They're going against the Seattle Seahawks. Russell Wilson, rather an erratic quarterback. Some days he's great, other days not so great. The Carolina Panthers have a pretty solid secondary. With that said, I would play the Panthers this week.
I think that's about the most sound advice as I have heard. They'll get penetration, and what you're doing is you're saying we're not going to care so much about what happens on the ground because we know Lynch is going to get yardage and he's going to take care of business. But if you can stop the quarterback, you can create turnovers. You might see a pick six this weekend too by the Carolina Panthers.
Exactly. And you're going to see a not so high scoring game. I think this is a game where this defense, the Panthers defense, can come out of there with 10 to 12 points.
Ooh. I'm going to go a little bit higher. I'm going to say that they get maybe 12.5.
Ooh.
Yeah. All right. Well, that's it for us for this first broadcast of the season. We had to come back and celebrate the real Zebras being back out on the field. If you have any questions, comments, suggestions, anything under the sun that you want to send us at the Fantasy Football Toolkit, throw us a line. Give us your debates. Give us your I need to pick this guy up and these are the only guys available. Give us your starts and sits. If you have any questions at all, if you're worried, if you're spending more time playing fantasy football than you are at work, you might want to see a therapist, or you could just email us.
Email us. What the heck? And by the way, we'll answer you at work.
Yeah, that's the other thing too. That's the great thing. A therapist will charge you, and guess what we'll do? Help.
That's right.
Send.
We make things work.
Yeah, we really do. We are the oil to your gears.
Just ask our wives.
Wow. You can send over your emails to lostcause@fantasyfootballtoolkit.com. If you want to listen to this broadcast as well as every other broadcast of the Fantasy Football Toolkit, a weekly look at fantasy football, the NFL, injury reports, start sit, studs, duds, previews, reviews, and everything that you need to fine-tune your football team one turn at a time. You can check out those broadcasts at 360 Sports Network, and that URL, folks, is 360sportsnetwork.com, as well as this website, fantasyfootballtoolkit.com, for a daily little dose of fantasy football action. You need to hurry up, get it in real quick. You're sitting at the computer, you don't know what to do. Check out the Daily Pigskin Blink, both at 360sportsnetwork.com as well as fantasyfootballtoolkit.com. And don't forget, it's Cancer Awareness Month, people. If you love her, make sure that she goes to the doctor and she gets an exam.
Even if you have to do an intervention to get her there, because life's too short not to.
And that's it. Well, that's it for us. Greg, you have a great weekend. I know that you got some tough decisions to make here coming up, but I'm rooting for you, buddy.
I think we're going to pull one out this week.
Cool. That's what she said. Take it easy, everybody. Have a good night.
Good night.